Hello and welcome to another arena draft here with Mike. I'm joined again today by Jeremiah Johnson. Hi,
Hello.
Jeremiah.
Hello, everybody.
How are you today?
I am doing great.
Excellent. So this is our fourth recorded match. Um, if you guys have been watching previously, then we're off to a pretty okay start. 5-3, 5-3, 4-3.
That's pretty good.
All break even or better drafts. Yeah, we have a doggo.
Yes, the corgi.
Love me the corgi. So that pack, we've got some other reasonable picks. There was a horrific assault. There was a couple other pretty good cards, but uh, I want to play the dog. Dog's great.
And Philly is good because when it attacks, doesn't it like basically blink something?
Yeah, it'll flicker something until end of turn, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your thing, which is great. You can clear a blocker out of the way, or you can flicker your own thing, and if you do, it'll get a +1/+1 counter at the end of turn.
Yeah.
So as long as you can keep it attacking, we're good. So this pack, we have a choice between Fanged Flames and Ajani Fells the Godsire. Uh, this is me checking to read the wording on Felia. Felia can in fact flicker the Saga, which is interesting because you can re-trigger Chapter 1. You can reset it,
Oh, that'd be good.
which
That'd be very
is
good.
pretty cool. The Fanged Flames, I would say, is on par or a better card, honestly, than the Ajani Fells the Godsire. 2 mana, when you want to be aggressive, it lets you double spell quickly. 4 damage for 2 mana is a good rate. You clear a lot of blockers that way. The exile comes up quite a bit. But you've heard my philosophy before. If I can stay kind of consistent over my first couple picks and make sure that I cut off a color, I'm very happy to do so. So taking the Ajani for color considerations, even though I think, in if I would generally lean, if that same pick comes around later in the pack and I know I'm Burrows, I'm probably taking the Fangs.
Yeah. Personally, I would have taken the Cannoneer because if I'm going to play artifact heavy, I can just keep because I
Yeah.
think Cannoneers enter the battlefield effect.
It is, but I'm not trying to play an artifact heavy deck, especially not with the Felia.
I get that.
But yeah, so we follow that up with the Metastatic Evangel, just another good, pretty aggressive white card. Lets you proliferate the +1/+1 counters that Felia ultimately or inevitably picks up. Plays well with the Felia, plays well with energy. I'm a big fan of the Evangel, one of my favorite cards. And now we're on Fanged Flames versus Static Prison. So, kind of seeing signs that these Fanged Flames, this is a pick 4. We could have had one pick 2. But we're kind of doing the same thing where we haven't decided what our second color is going to be. And in terms of like power level, Static Prison and Fanged Flames are pretty on par. They're both cheap, efficient removal spells.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I choose to take the white card here. Notably, you can also upgrade what you have captured under the Static Prison with Felia. You can flicker the prison with Felia, which untraps whatever you had under there. But then when it comes in, you can upgrade what you had trapped
Oh,
potentially. So here we have a Wrath of the Skies. Just a Wrath of God in limited is always worthwhile. I appear to be, kind of a low to the ground, maybe more aggressive deck, but anytime you can set up a Wrath, it's worth doing. So yeah. In this pick, I think the Guardian of the Forgotten is fine, but I'm looking here. I really like the idea of the Inspired Inventor here. Again, just another good thing to flicker with the Felia. Plays well with the Metastatic Evangel, as 2 of the modes on it are going to give the Evangel something to proliferate. And I'm pretty happy about that. Here we have Thraben Charm versus the Guardian of the Forgotten. I personally am not that impressed by the Guardian. 4 mana 4/4 is fine. Vigilance is whatever. And the modified creatures flipping into Manifest it's good. It's certainly powerful if it's doing something, but it requires setup that I'm not necessarily interested in, and a 4 mana 4/4 in this format just is a little bit medium. So yeah, I'm taking the Thraben Charm here. Just give me another efficient removal spell. And now we haven't settled on a second color, but the only playable card for us is this Faithful Watchdog, so we just grab it. That doesn't lock us into green by any means, but it was the only card that we even might play.
Yeah. It's good to have options.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially pack 1.
So here we have the Glasswing Grace Wield, which is, a land or a spell, whatever we need it to be, so we're perfectly happy to take it. We were considering the Skoa briefly, as it's also another card that's very good to flicker. That's a powerful ETB dealing 4 damage anywhere you want. So, yeah. At the end of the day, we took the white card again, as we've done for basically this entire pack. We basically have a mono white pack 1. The Mandibular Kite, just a fantastic card. I don't really care about the Solstice guy. This Fanged Flames wheeling this late is a clear sign, to me at least, that moving into Boros is probably what we want to be doing at this point.
Yeah.
This Fanged Flames being a 12th pick is wild to me. Cyclops into the sideboard, Landscape probably into the sideboard. It finds one of our colors, so we'll see what happens. So this pack, again, we got the Wheeled Fanged Flames, so this pack is between the Mandibular Kite and the Galvanic Discharge, and honestly, it's not particularly close. We're going to take the very efficient removal spell here.
Yeah, that'd be the choice I'd pick too, is the removal.
Yeah. We have some good green cards, notably. So, if we wanted to lean more towards the Watchdog, taking the Brood Scale or the color are also viable. But, yeah, with the Fanged Flames coming around that late, we're certainly interested in moving into red.
Yeah.
Because it looks like we're going to get paid off, if not this pack, then in the next pack.
There's another Fanged Flames.
There's Fanged Flames, there's a Galvanic Discharge, there's another Evangel. This pack has a lot. The Pyro Surfer's worth taking, the flip cards are both worth taking. At the end of the day, I really like the Evangel, and some people are going to like the Discharge better there. Now that I've drafted more, I think maybe I'm leaning closer to the Galvanic Discharge, but again, I'm very happy to have multiple Evangels. They just play well with a lot of what we're doing so far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Envoy of the Ancestors here, Outlast, fine, sure, whatever, but more importantly, modified creatures you control have lifelink, and we have the Felia that's going to do it to itself. We have the Inspired Inventor that can put a +1/+1 counter somewhere. We have the Ajani Fells the Godsire that puts a Vigilance counter on a creature. We now have 2 Glasswing Graces that make a creature modified by virtue of enchanting it.
Yep.
So we're pretty happy to pick up the modified creatures get lifelink.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That is a good idea for sure.
So, also, I think it was kind of the only good white card in the pack.
Yeah.
So, Detective Phoenix pick 5. I'm barely looking at the rest of the cards in this pack. Detective Phoenix is a monster of a card. This card is just incredibly powerful. Whether you're playing it as just a hasty Drake for 3 mana, you don't want to be doing that, honestly. You'd rather be bestowing it. But the fact that it bestows for 1 mana and then just exiling your removal spells or your dead creatures that you don't really have access to once they're in the graveyard anyway, it gives haste. So if you can play some kind of a creature and then add 1 mana to bestow the Phoenix onto it, suddenly you have a giant flying creature with haste. The Phoenix just closes out games very, very easily. We took a Ral in the Implicit Maze here, another good, powerful Saga, and another good Flicker target if we get to do it with the Felia. We're looking at the Landscape versus the Thraben Charm here, which is pretty whatever. I switched Landscapes there, if you're paying attention, just because one of them I didn't have a playset of already, and just finishing off the Arena playset. They're both red-white Landscapes, which is all I cared about.
Okay.
Another Fanged Flames coming around late. That was another 8th pick Fanged Flames. I don't know if people at this pod just aren't valuing the red cards, or if maybe I think they're better than they are, but I'm very happy to be where we're at so far. Mandibular Kite, I think, is better than the Void Pouncer, so we're going to take the second one of those. Being able to jump any of my creatures matters. We have a bunch of removal already. I'm less interested in the Dog Umbra than just having good mana, so we'll take another Landscape there. Essence Reliquary, Jolted Awake, whatever, they're going into the sideboard. I'm not really interested in either. Take the uncommon into the sideboard. Thraben Charm Wheeling, very good. That puts me at 2 Thraben Charms, 2 Fanged Flames, a Galvanic Discharge, and a Static Prison, plus the Sagas on 5 that are both removal when they come into play.
Right.
So we are looking to have a very good curve out aggressive deck with good cheap removal so that we can continue to curve. The line breaker here would have been a consideration if we had more things that cared about colorless. But honestly, I'd rather have the Raptor than the line breaker in general, and certainly when I don't really plan on having colorless sources.
Yeah.
Area Auxiliary versus the Conduit Goblin. I think this pick is very close. We have a lot of 2-drops already, but we're never upset to have more in an aggressive burrow strategy. That said, we have double Metastatic Evangel, and being able to proliferate the +1/+1 counters that are provided by the Airy is very interesting. Like a very good thing for me.
Yeah.
I think here we just want to be aggressive and take the Goblin, but I think it's pretty close.
Oh, another Goblin.
Yeah, so here we have a choice. We have 3 very good 2-drops here. We have the Hexgold Slith, we have the Conduit Goblin, and we have the 3rd Metastatic Evangel. At this point, because we already have 2 Evangels, I think it comes down to the Goblin or the Slith, and I think we want the second Goblin. I think we want the second Goblin. Being able to give like some of my larger creatures haste on an important turn is just more important than anything. That's another Galvanic Discharge, like 4th pick.
Yeah, I was thinking with the Slith, the ability for it to just pump itself up.
Yeah, but it has to hit, and the Goblin allows other things to get in. We just want to be aggressive. Ghostfire Slice, pick 5. Like we're just... Our removal suite is incredibly good in this deck, and we have good 2-mana creatures, so that we should be able to double spell on the turns where we're casting removal.
Mm-hmm.
This deck is
that late.
Well, it's an online draft. Remember, cards don't have real world value, so nobody's going to rare draft the unplayable mythic rare, even if it has real world value, because it's digital.
That makes sense. Sorry, my collector side came out.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a collector side on Arena. What'd we grab there? We grabbed something that was, like, fine, but not terribly exciting. Yeah, a Void Pouncer. That's what we grabbed. So now we have the second Ral in the Implicit Maze. We wheel another one of these 2-drops, which was, I believe, from the pack I opened that just had infinite good 2-mana creatures. Mm-hmm. So we were pretty likely to wheel one of them. Second Unicorn is fine. Like, looking at the curve of this deck, we're just 5 1-drops and like 12 2-drops. Our curve functionally stops at 3 with a couple Sagas on 5. Mm-hmm. And this is, I'm very happy to live here as an aggressive Burrows deck. Oh, if I could script my draft and do this on purpose every time, I absolutely would.
Oh, absolutely. That's like the perfect setup
for an aggressives. Yeah. So now, with an aggressive deck, we want to win a lot of die rolls. That's where we're at. Spoiler alert, my die roll percentage in this format is somewhere in the 40% on the play range. And I went through one fun stretch of 20 games where I was only on the play for 8 of them. Or, I'm sorry, 6 of them. 6 of 20 on the play, 14 on the draw. I have had some bad luck rolling dice. So, yeah, I'm very happy with how this came out. Yeah, Draftsmith not even bothering to try to add anything. It's just like, nope, this deck's good. Do the thing, please. So we see what it wants me to cut, and we'll see if I agree. Draftsmith thinks that the colorless lands are relevant for some reason, even though I have nothing in my deck that cares about colorless. So we're gonna decline this.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's not a landscape that fetches both of my colors, I am very not interested in putting it in my deck with this deck. It wants me to cut the Envoy of Ancestors, it wants me to cut one of the Rals, and it wants me to cut the Skoa. The Skoa I agree with. I want the Skoa out. I don't want this card.
I'd keep the Ral, though.
Yeah, I kind of want that second Rals back. I have to scroll here for all of the 2-drops, which feels great. Trimming down on lands, that's 9, 10, 11. It wants me to add all these colorless ones, and I'm just going to kind of show what it wants to do, and then you'll see me make changes here. The nesting grounds I legitimately actually like. With the ability to proliferate counters, just getting a counter on something and then moving it over to a second thing so that it can be proliferated onto both suddenly makes the Metastatic Evangels do more. The ability to remove saga counters so that you can re-trigger chapters is something that's worth considering.
Absolutely.
So, I like the nesting grounds. We're not terribly reliant on a bunch of colors. Like, all of our double color pips are on our 5s. So we're pretty
solid
okay.
on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, we want the landscapes that are both red and white so that we make sure that our mana works, but we're not really interested in the off-color landscapes. We have literally nothing to do with that Ugin's Labyrinth. Like, there's no 7-mana card to exile. It'll never tap for 2, and I don't want a colorless land in my deck unless it has some kind of functionality. Yeah. So, like, the nesting grounds can stick around because it does something.
Yeah, and if you'd had a bunch of big-ass Eldrazi...
Yeah, if we're in the Eldrazi deck, sure, but...
We're not there.
We're not.
We are Boros.
Yeah. So, what are we looking at here? 6, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 mana sources, counting the 2 Glasswing Graces. So, we're pretty happy with the lands. We don't need another one. So this is 14 lands plus 2 modal dual-faced lands, which sounds low, but again, if you look at the curve of this deck, we're legitimately stopping at 3, and then we have 3 5-mana sagas, and the Glasswing Graces are only spells if I can cast them. Otherwise, they're just my land drop for turn.
Yeah.
So we don't really care that they're 5s for all intents and purposes. So I would like to make room for this second Rouse if I'm honest. I think. Yeah. So honestly, scrolling down, I forgot I had that Wrath of the Skies. We are a incredibly low to the ground, incredibly aggressive, permanent heavy deck. And I gotta be honest, as much as normally I want Wrath in any deck, even if I tend towards aggressive, because you can set it up, I don't ever want to have to try to come from behind with this deck.
Yeah.
And setting up a Wrath is like, okay, you play enough to the board that you get your opponent to overcommit and you Wrath. Okay, sure, that's fine. But I don't really have anything that's gonna survive this Wrath. Like, I can't set it up to where, okay, I Wrath everything that costs 1 or 2, but I get to keep my 3 drops kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I don't have 3 drops to keep. You know, I only have a couple in the deck, so I'm really not a big fan of Wrath of the Skies in specifically this deck.
Yeah.
Even though I like the card in general. So here you see I'm splitting around my creatures versus my non-creatures. The Ral and the Implicit Maze and the Ajani Fells the Godsire sort of count as creatures, because Chapter 3 of Ral's and Chapter 2 of Ajani both make a token.
Okay.
So we're at 1, 3, 5, 7, 8. 8 actual removal spells. The Ajani counts as a removal spell. The Ral counts as a removal spell. So 10 removal spells.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rals and the Ajanis get to double up as creatures as well. And that's not counting the Wrath of the Skies. I think at the end of the day, I want to swap out this Wrath of the Skies for the second Rals.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It was just, like you said, you have nothing that can survive except for maybe 2 or 3 cards.
Right.
So.
Yeah, like, we could play another 2-drop if we want the Void Pouncer. We could play the Skoa if we want, a big finisher kind of a card. Mm. But at the end of the day, I would rather have the 5-drop specifically because I don't want to have to go all the way up to 6, considering I want to trim lands from the deck.
Yeah.
And the Rouse is going to be very good at making sure that my attacks are profitable basically at all times.
Yeah.
You know, even if I'm suicide attacking some of my creatures into larger creatures, if I'm getting in some damage and getting to clean up the larger creatures post-combat with the Pyroclasm effect from the Rouse, I'm happy about it. So, alright, here we go for round number 1 then. Opponent, I would like you to know that I want to be very aggressive. And we win our first die roll. We did it.
Nice.
We're on the play.
Yes.
We have a hand.
That's good stuff.
Our hand has a 1-drop and a Phoenix, and that's fine. We also have a couple removal spells. So we're just going to poke away with this kite until we draw something relevant, and we have a Phoenix to follow it up with.
Nice.
Seems alright. Opponent does nothing. We do nothing. Just boop for 1. And continue on. Would have loved to have drawn a 2-drop here. You know, we have infinite 2-drops in our deck.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't have it, and that's okay. Alright, opponent trading some damage. We can... So, I think this turn we want an untapped source because we want to play the Phoenix out here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll see what we draw next turn. If we find another land, then we can hold on to the Glasswing Grace to use it as a spell. If we don't find another land, then we can play it as our land to make sure that we have that Rouse rolled up.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why these modal dual-faced lands are so good in this format. Just the ability to be a spell or a land, whichever you need at the time. The Unicorn here gives us some options. We can play it out as a bestowed creature, but our opponent passed the turn with all of their mana up, so I'm partial to just attacking instead of opening myself up to having my card removed in response and dealing less combat damage that turn.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, opponent choosing to shoot down my bird after it hit them. Sure.
Yeah, I'd have probably done that.
Well, the problem with that is if you try to do that and then I respond with a pump spell or something, like waiting for after combat is a pretty common thing once you start kind of learning timing tricks in the game.
Yeah.
Opponent is at a high enough life total that they're willing to take the 1 or 2 extra damage to make sure that I'm not playing out something scarier that they really need to hit with that Galvanic Discharge. So I agree with opponent's play, but it's also why I didn't just bestow the Unicorn the previous turn. Using the Ghostfire Slice on the 2/3, even though we have the Rouse in hand, it doesn't die to the Rouse, so we want to just clear up the 2/3 while we can. We're still just trading damage with our opponent here. We're slightly ahead in the race, and we have the Rouse. Opponent is on a Burrow deck just like we are. So what we're honestly hoping here is that they play out some more stuff that gets swept up by a Pyroclasm. So we cleared up the 2/3. We bestowed just to push some extra damage, even though we're not getting any trigger off the Mentor. But opponent did, in fact, play out a second creature here that dies. And now we get to play this Rouse to sweep up both of their creatures, getting a nice clean 2-for-1.
Yep.
And still pushing more damage. So now we're very far ahead. Our last card in hand is a removal spell, and we have a Detective's Phoenix in our graveyard just waiting for more fodder to get there so that we can play it again. Rouse lets us discard. I don't need a second Mandibular Kite here, and I'd rather just draw 2 extra cards. Both of them are lands, not ideal, but that's okay. Still trading damage, still racing. We're in for 3. If opponent has something that clears the germ, we're very okay with that. Yep, opponent is at 4. We could play the Static Prison here, but we're not really, like, scared of this Molten Gatekeeper. So, honestly, my thought process here is we're just going to crack both of these landscapes to thin our deck out. Mm-hmm. Next turn, the Rouse goes to the graveyard after making a weird token. and we can bestow the Phoenix onto the Weird because we have the fodder from the Rals going to the graveyard.
Yeah.
So we have lethal flying damage from 2 different places, basically.
Apparently
And
not.
opponent's off it. They can't win the race at this point. So we go to game 2. Next game. So that was a good game. We were on the play. We got to do what we wanted to do.
Very aggressive.
We are no longer on the play. But this hand is gas.
Yep. Still good.
Still good. We are on the draw. Our opponent doesn't have a 1-drop, so we happy to go Kite into Goblin into a bunch of kill spells and see what happens.
Yep.
So, Marionette Apprentice, very good card. I would very much like to murder that thing, but for right now, we want to develop our board. Yeah. All right. So. Yeah. All right. So. I guess I choose to Fanged Flames here on the Apprentice. Just get it out of here before anything else happens.
Yeah, you definitely don't need that thing.
I suppose it makes sense. We drew the 3-drop, which means our mana is spoken for on the following turn. So just taking this turn to get rid of the Apprentice makes sense. This Pigeon, obviously, pretty obnoxious.
Yeah.
We're either discarding the land or the 3-drop, I think.
Which 3-drop?
The Inventor, probably. I think I want to keep the removal no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this might be a little greedy, but we still have plays here. We can just... We have a choice whether we want to attack here. Yeah, if they want to block and trade with the Germ, that's okay. If they don't block, that's okay. We play the Goblin here. So.
We're effectively getting behind in the mana curve, though.
Yeah, we are. But again, we have another 1-drop still in our hand with the Galvanic Discharge. It doesn't matter what they discard here. We can clear this Sentry. Fang Flames is fine too. We don't have another 1-drop, so we might as well just use the... Yeah, might as well use the more mana-efficient play here. No reason to pump, I don't think. But we do get to attack with both. So... You know, opponent can attack for 3, we can attack for 3. Opponent is up on mana, but we're up on cards. And our hand is kill spell, hasty creature.
I mean, that's...
And if they do keep clearing our stuff, remember that the Phoenix doesn't bestow only from the graveyard. The Phoenix can bestow from the hand as well. So if they do just keep killing off like my 2-drops and whatnot, I will just get to bestow this Phoenix even before anything. That said, opponent is ahead in the race at this point, so I think just leaving back the Germ to be able to block the Flyer. Again, if they want to spend a kill spell on the Germ, that's okay. Yeah. Right now, you know, because we discarded a land, which is a choice that we made.
Yep.
But we also have all gas in hand. So.
What's the equip cost on that thing?
4.
4, okay.
Yes, sir. So, we're not equipping anytime soon, but we do have Felia in the deck, so if we get to attack with the Felia, we can flicker it, which then makes another Germ. Opponent making us discard an extra card here is a little annoying, but we have the Phoenix at least, which, you know, is kind of like not discarding a card.
Yeah.
So, we can just bestow the Phoenix here if we want to.
We have Felia, too.
Yeah, we do have Felia as well. So, our choice here, because we can only... We still haven't drawn a 3rd land, or I guess technically 4th land. We have the choice here is whether we want to cast the Felia. Felia does have flash; we can do it on our opponent's turn, or if we just want to bestow the Phoenix right here and now onto the Goblin and start pressuring our opponent again. I think here it's better to get more bodies into play, but I'm also okay if they want to trade off their familiar with the Goblin here. Knowing that we have the Felia as a follow-up, getting rid of their 2-power creature makes it just that slightly bit more likely that the Felia is going to get to attack cleanly next turn.
Yeah.
So end of turn, we Felia. After that, that's fine. So a 2/1 flyer, basically. So opponent is very likely to just attack us here. Yep. We'll take 3. And now we get to flash in Felia. We get to untap. We can bestow the Detective Phoenix onto the Felia to make sure that it's getting in profitably. We get to reset the Mandibular Kite with the Felia attack. And we, if we had drawn a land, which we didn't, we could have potentially played yet another 1-drop, depending on what we drew.
Which is true.
So, in any case, I like getting the Felia in here. So we're going to either... Yeah, I think we're just going to clear the Snacker here. We're kind of in a tough spot because we don't know what color of mana we're likely to draw, but we do have multiple red cards in hand. So what I know I want right now is I want to attack with the Felia, I want to reset the Kite, and I kind of want to pressure our opponent by attacking with the Goblin as well, which means that clearing the blocker so that we press as much damage as we can ultimately uses more of our mana and gets in more damage. So using the Thraben Charm here winds up being the consideration over over bestowing the Detective Phoenix. The Phoenix can come back at any point, but yeah, ultimately we just decide to play the Phoenix. On the Felia, which means that the Felia gets to attack into this 2/1 without any real problem, while also flickering the Kite, giving me a flying blocker as well.
Yep.
Either line lets me flicker the Kite. It's just whether or not I wanted the line that used more of my mana. And I don't know. I think it's really close. This is a cute play by opponent, but it only works when they do it on their own turn. As far as getting back the Snacker, you can sacrifice the Snacker to the Insight, which then draws your 3rd card and brings the Snacker back from your graveyard into play. But that only works on your turn. When you do it on your opponent's turn, it's only your 2nd card for the turn.
Oh wow!
Unless you do something else. So breathe your last on the Felia. Sure, we still have this Phoenix, so our board is still large.
Yep.
So, I don't know. The fact that we didn't use all our mana and it's harder for us to double spell next turn makes me think we maybe should have used the Thraben Charm instead of putting the Phoenix into play. That said, having the Phoenix in play, like, we sure just get to do everything now, right? Like, we get to attack, our opponent's board is cleared down a little bit. Our life total is high enough. Sure. Destroying the thing that comes back seems okay to me.
A lot of sense.
Well, I mean, we can't bring it back right away, right? Like, at the end of the day, that is the thing that they can't block at the moment.
Yeah.
So. But we're back to a situation now where we're just like, okay, I kind of just need to use all of my mana as often as possible. And I would like to apply as much pressure as possible here as well. So here's 2 3-power guys. We're going to give our guy haste with the Goblin. We're going to put a counter on it with the 3-drop, since we finally drew the land.
Which took forever, mind you.
Yeah, exactly. So the attack here from our opponent is very likely because they want to sacrifice their thing to the insight. They get to draw 2 cards. They get to get back their snacker. That said, the snacker is tapped, I believe. Yeah, return to the battlefield tapped. So opponent only has 1 mana up. Now they have 2. And we have this Ghostfire Slice. So if we can get in for 6... Hey, they found a way to get rid of our thing. We can't get in for 6.
Oh.
So here we are back to,
They have answered the problem.
Yeah. Back to square one, as it were. But
it doesn't look as bad because now they're...
No, we're doing fine, but we still can't get this Phoenix back. We're at a stalemate of 10 life apiece, but I have 4 cards in hand and, larger threats in play.
Mm-hmm.
So, in for 2. We can discharge the snacker if they leave it back as a blocker. We can Ghostfire Slice them. We have some options. We don't mind taking 2 here, and we have 2 removal spells up. So if they decide they want to try to race, which I don't think they do, then they can attack. And if they don't attack but play other things, yeah, we have options to just get some things done. So we shoot them, we untap, we clear the blocker. I would like to pay 1 energy. And then we attack for lethal. So despite all of the mana problems that we had that game, we were never really, way behind.
They weren't in too much trouble, it just appeared to be in trouble.
Yeah, it was more trouble because we were having difficulty double spelling. But that's the good thing about having this very low curve deck. As soon as we found the 3rd mana source, we double spelled almost every turn. We just have a lot of 2 mana and 1 mana cards, right?
Yeah.
So we're on the play.
Good.
We did it. We have our colors. We have our spells. The double rouse is a little scary, but we have 3 lands. We have a Conduit Goblin, a kill spell, and some stuff to play for, so that means lands are okay because they get us to our rouse, and spells are okay because they all cost less than 5, so it's okay.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I would have done right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Play the tap land first.
Yes, play the tap land, make sure that everything we draw is a live draw.
Mm-hmm.
So the opening hand looks a little wonky, but at the end of the day, it is a hand where lands are good and spells are good.
Yep.
So there's no bad draws in the deck at that point. I think the only bad draw in the deck is the Johnny Fells the Godsire, because it's a 5-drop that we can't cast. Everything else we can cast. So right here, I'm personally on board with play the 2nd Goblin, give it haste, and attack for 5.
Yes. That is exactly what I would do.
Yep. Play Goblin, give it haste, attack for 5. We have 3 energy remaining, so we can still give other things haste later in the game. I do not want to do that one. I do want to do this one. Charge. Opponent has the Springheart Nantuku in hand, so we certainly know that we're going to want to clean that up. It's just whether or not they get a chance to bestow it, or if they just get it down. They didn't play it pre-combat, so yeah, they definitely have something else they want to be doing here. And that's fine. Phoenix is nice. We can choose to just play the Phoenix and attack for 2. We can Galvanic Discharge the Repurposer and attack with both of our goblins. We can Thraben Charm the Repurposer and still have Discharge up for whatever they might do next turn. Yeah. Whatever so the scary part about this is we leave them with a bunch of mana, right? 3 Eldrazi spawn is a lot of Eldrazi spawn.
Yeah,
that's 7 mana potentially next turn.
That's a little scary.
It's a little scary. And because of how scary it is, we are choosing to just, make sure that we're pressuring them. We want to save our energy because even if they have all of these Eldrazi spawn, we have 3 energy banked plus this Galvanic Discharge that we're holding up. which means they can play something with up to 6 toughness, and we can just clear it on the spot.
Yeah.
With the 1 mana that we left up.
Oh, Nadu.
Nadu. That card's a pain in the butt. Anyway, kill it.
Yes, that must die.
So this is actually kind of best case for me. They're sacrificing their spawn to try to kill one of my things, and we get to clear it immediately, counterspelling functionally their signature slam. They do get the second Nadu trigger, but they gave up all 3 of their spawn this turn. So we're getting to, for 1 mana, kill their play, counterspell their second play.
Wipe their field.
Yeah, and now they have nothing, which means we get to attack freely. So here's a Phoenix. We have energy left over. Even though the Phoenix already has haste, based on the fact that our hand is the double Rouse, we can attack for 6, put them to 5. I kind of just want to push damage here, I think. Yeah, take action. Put them to where any 2 creatures are lethal.
Mm-hmm. Put them in panic mode for a minute.
Yeah. So if they play small stuff, we have these double Rouse. We have to draw land to make that work, but that's okay.
Yeah, either they're going to play a bunch of things, or they're going to forfeit.
Exactly. Either we draw land, and we have this Rouse that sweeps up small things on the board, or we draw spells, and everything outside of a Johnny's is a playable spell.
Oh.
Fanged Flames exiling the Goblin. Okay. Yeah, exiling the Goblin instead of the Phoenix seems incorrect, but I guess if...
I guess they just want to do something before they end it.
Yeah, like, they can play the Springheart Nantuku here, but if they don't have a land drop, it's just a 1/1.
And that's no good.
Yeah, that doesn't do anything. They do have the land drop, and they
still
kill themselves.
Yeah.
So, let's see. If they play that turn, they exile my Phoenix instead. They play the Nantuku. They play the land even if it's tapped, and they make a 1/1. They have 2 blockers. I attack with both. They're both chump blocks unless they double block. But if they double block, they're taking the damage. Yeah, they're in a real rough spot there, kind of no matter what.
Yeah.
We are on the play again, so we're 3-1, play versus draw.
Yeah, I would mulligan that, though.
Yeah, so you can see I'm checking my lands. I want to see how many red sources I actually have in the deck. And I agree with you. We're mulliganing. This hand, on the other hand...
With the landscape, we can still sack and get a red.
Yeah, so our turn 1 here is find a mountain and play the Goblin on 2. So we can either put a Unicorn back, because we have 2 of them, or we can put back the Inspired Inventor here, because, you know, if we don't draw a 3rd land for a while, then going 2-drop, 2-drop, 2-drop is still serviceable.
Yeah, it's still viable.
So
definitely.
it's...
I would definitely have done that, though.
The mulligan?
Yeah.
Mulligan into landscape on 1, yeah. Yeah, this I think was the easy decisions. So, obviously we'd like to draw the 3rd land by turn 3. That's the goal, but as we saw from one of our other games, we don't always just draw the lands.
Yeah,
so.
they don't always just show up.
Yep. So, that's not a land, but that's okay. Here's a Goblin. One of the cool interactions with the Conduit Goblin and the Unicorn, next turn, even if we don't draw the land, we get to use an energy to give the Unicorn +1/+0 in haste, which means it's 3 power, so when it attacks, it will in fact mentor a counter onto the Goblin.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so next turn, you know, depending on what our opponent does, we're attacking for 6.
Okay.
We're attacking for 6.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, we drew the land, so... Yeah, okay, just be mana efficient. I think we want to make the body here. No? Alright.
Go for a 1/1 counter.
I mean, that's fair. We're still attacking for 6.
Yeah, either way, it's still 6. Either they're going to chump block and only take 3, or no, they just took all 6.
No, it actually makes sense to put the counter on the Goblin here. The Hydra Trainer, when it evolves, turns itself into a 3/3, and making it so that it trades with the Goblin rather than just gets to block it for free.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was talking about your attack on them.
Yeah. Well, so what we get to do, opponent just spent the turn here adapting. Mm-hmm. So now we can... That's a perfect draw. So now we get to play a thing, static prison on the Hydra Trainer so that they can't block. So they spent their whole turn just putting counters on a thing that's not there. Give our thing haste. And then attack for, 8? So yeah, on turn 4, our opponent is at 6 and has no board.
That's rough as hell.
We have the 4th land, which means we get to bestow this unicorn, which means we also get mentor. So we have what is functionally an extra 3 power of more haste.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Best thing they could do now is surrender.
No, like there are certainly ways out of games, right?
I mean, it's possible, but it's looking very bleak.
Well, we're down to the last card in hand, so like, yeah, here we go. So they play a guy, they get to shoot one of my guys and gain life, right? Like, unfortunately for them, the only thing that actually died to the 2/2 is the least valuable creature I had in play.
Mm. What is the sorcery or instant or whatever side of that? Yeah, that was just.
It's an aura that gives +2/+2 and flying.
Oh.
And lifelink.
And you can just pay white for that instead of white and
correct.
Black
Yeah, I can cast this card. So. So we bestow onto the goblin. We get to move a counter onto the envoy. Both of them are, large and lifelinking and stuff. We could have bestowed onto the envoy as well, but putting it on the goblin means we're going to get more triggers off the mentor if this game pushes forward for like a longer amount of time.
I don't think it's going to.
Neither do I. My opponent is like dead on board as it is, though again, they are playing an Eldrazi deck. There are multiple cards that are going to make 2 bodies for the cost of 1 card. Yeah. So there is still the ability to not be dead here. So if we draw land, our opponent dies to just jumping a thing and having flying. They have 2 bodies. We will...
You can give the goblin flying right now. And just
I cannot. It costs 5 mana.
Oh, it costs 5? Oh, shit. I only got 4.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and keep this thing pinned down. No reason to give our opponent another blocker right now and let the Nentuku not have to chump block. And then we Fanged Flames. It doesn't... I think we Fanged Flames... Yeah, it doesn't really matter, but the Nentuku to make sure they can't rebuy it. We attack with both. We mentor onto the guy again. We're in for 9. They have to block 1. Yeah, they're off it.
Yeah.
So I said we needed to be on the play a bunch. We've been on the play 3 times out of 4 games.
That's a bunch.
That's a bunch. That is 4, right? 3 out of 4? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So. Emra Cool. It's a good name. I like it. We're on the play again.
We have our colors.
Better lucky than good sometimes.
Yep.
We get to be on the play a bunch with our aggressive deck. Arena is shining on me today.
Yes.
Or that day. So, like you said, we have our colors. We're just going to play the tapped land here on turn 1 so that we open up our curve. Turn 2, we get to play the goblin, which, again, probably our best 2-drop.
Yep.
The ability to give our follow-up play haste, always good. So, depending on what our opponent does, yeah, so that's a Death Touch creature. We want to use all of our mana. We prefer to be efficient, so we're going to shoot down this. We get an energy banked, which is nice. We play the unicorn, not bestow it, even though we have the land drop next turn. We get to give it +1/+0, attack with both, which means it has 3 power, so we get to mentor, as we were talking about a minute ago. Yep. So turn 3, we're in for 6, and our opponent doesn't have a board yet.
These are good things.
Yep.
Don't look a land.
Yeah, so the question here, we can kind of make the same play again. We can just attack with a pair of 3 power creatures, but then we're trading off with the repurposer. So I don't think I like any real attacks this turn. The 3/3 kind of brick walls us. I don't really want to trade. What I get to do here is just put 2 bodies into play, and then pass the turn with the kite that I have the mana to move. So if I want to, I can give the kite flying and get in for 2 here. And, you know, we are an aggressive deck. Getting in for the extra couple points of damage might matter.
Yeah.
But I don't want to trade off any of my creatures for their 3/3. That just ramps them.
Yeah, that wouldn't make any kind of sense. That's not what we need right now.
Yeah, so our board is pretty wide. We have 4 damage that can go face in hand.
Yeah.
So our opponent is at functionally 8. So if we can kind of scrape across the finish line, we're pretty okay with that. So, yeah.
I wonder what the opponent's thinking right now.
So it depends what's in their hand. You know, they could have like Spawning Chrysalis here, or Writhing Chrysalis, excuse me, which is their best play. Replaces the guys, gives them the ability to have a reach blocker, which nullifies my Mandibular Kite. Any body that allows for some double blocks is good for my opponent. But barring that, like, if their play is just like they have one of the smaller creatures, or I don't know. I don't know what they have here. I don't know what would make them think this long. Okay. So they changed their mind. So notably, one of the things that I have the ability to do next turn, depending on what this board looks like, they play another guy. So I think what I want to do here is we can move the kite onto the unicorn, which gives the unicorn flying and 3 power. And then we can attack with the unicorn and the envoy and get the mentor trigger. We're not going to give this... Yeah. Attack here, mentor here. And now they have to double block if they want to clear the Ancestor. And now I get to, like, get rid of this Witness before it gets to adapt. So I do lose my Envoy here, but I still force 3 damage through. And we get rid of the thing that potentially gets back something that I don't like whether a land or the Dryad, you know, something with Death Touch.
Yeah.
Stuff I don't want to have to deal with again.
Yeah, because that can become a whole problem.
Yeah. So, Fetid Gargantua here, no big deal. I think we want to hold on to this Glasswing Grace. Honestly, the way we try to win this game is by jumping something into the air. If we can apply enough pressure, then opponent can't really afford to activate this Gargantua. So, yeah, we can potentially put a counter on the unicorn. If we attack with both, that's a mentor trigger. So I think we like that. Like, we're trading off our 2-drop for their 5-drop at that point. Giving this haste doesn't... Does this matter? Oh, yeah, okay. I'm realizing in the video. Okay. So we attack all. We mentor onto the goblin, I think, here. Yeah, we definitely mentor into the goblin, because then the repurposer can't do anything about it. So this allows them to double trade but take 4. What I think I should have done here is put the +1/+1 counter from the the inventor onto the... not the +1/+1 counter. I should have used the energy to give the unicorn an additional +1/+0 and attacked with just it. And what that lets me do is put them to 4, because I would get 5 in the air, and then they're just dead to the Ghost Fire Slice if they don't gain life on their turn.
Okay.
So, what this play lets me do is just trade off with their board and put them to 5. Now, they still have to deal with the flying unicorn. They still have to deal with the fact that I have 4 damage that they don't know about in the Ghost Fire Slice. And they have to deal with the fact that I can jump something with the Glasswing Grace if we ever draw another land. But if I just put them at 4 here, then the amount of draws that they have to get out of it is just significantly lower. So yeah. So now they played a giant reach blocker, and now if they were at 4, they would be dead because this Ghost Fire Slice would kill them. But they're not dead because that's not what I did. And that's very sad, because now I can't really attack. So now opponent gets to keep playing and has a large reach blocker. So
that's a whole problem.
Yeah, I just realized it too late that I should have just put them to 4. And I was looking at how I could clean up their board and what I could do to pare it down and make sure... Yeah. I don't care about this thing. This 6/6, I'm at 28. If they want to try to race me, I'm very okay with that. So, we have the Felia. You said
Felia can essentially flicker anything on the field.
It can. So, yeah, if we get the Felia here, we know attack, we pass the turn, Felia has flash. Our opponent is very unlikely to attack us, but I guess it's possible. And then we can end step, put the Felia into play. When we attack, Felia can clear a blocker out of the way, whether it's a token or otherwise. Just getting any blocker out of the way is good for us. And if we draw land, we're still on the Glasswing Grace's lethal.
Yep.
So. We're kind of in a position here where it's just like, okay, opponent, do you have removal or anything relevant? Or am I going to get to try to win this game next turn? They're tapping a bunch of mana, so that's probably good for me. Yeah, your thing has counters. You got it. Your large thing has counters. That card doesn't matter.
That's a big booger.
Yeah, so what's actually notable here is because opponent played the Cursed Wombat, our Ghost Fire Slice is reduced to 1 mana. So we actually get to Felia plus Ghost Fire Slice them down to 1.
Oh, that's...
which we would not have been able to do. We take 9.
Mm-hmm.
You got me. Anyway, they have yet another blocker. So, yeah. So we get to... That thing resolves. We get to Felia. We get to put them to 1. Doesn't really matter what order we do it in. They're tapped out. Here's a Doge. Trigger. We get another counter. Look, a land. It's irrelevant, but we're going to play our spells because we can. Doge has flying. Attack with everything. Trigger, Mentor, put a counter somewhere. Felia, flicker this reach blocker out of play. And yeah. The game is over.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. We gave our opponent one more turn than they should have had. So even though we won that game, we need to acknowledge when we make mistakes. And that's just for anybody looking for a tip on what they can do to progress their own playability. Even when you win, you probably didn't play perfectly. And look for those small edges where if you play better, you'll then in the games that are closer and that you lose by just that small margin, acknowledge that small mistake from the game that you won. Don't make it in the game that's close, and maybe you win that game that's close instead of losing it.
That makes sense.
So just acknowledge that people aren't going to play perfectly even when you're good at this game.
Yeah.
I won that game. I did not play perfectly. The small decision that we made there potentially gave our opponent a turn that they shouldn't have had.
Yeah.
So.
Everybody makes mistakes, though. So.
Oh, absolutely. And believe me, I'm not trying to say that I am infallible, just pointing out that, if we acknowledge those mistakes, we're less likely to make them later. And then, like I said, in the games that are closer, we can squeak out those games because we try to make less mistakes. Notably, we won the die roll again. We are really running hot with this aggressive deck.
We're on streak for sure.
So, opponent didn't do anything. We're happy that they didn't do anything. Sure, they can sacrifice their guy and draw some cards. They can get it back later. We're just applying pressure, and that's okay. That said, we've drawn a lot of lands. We don't have the second white source, so we can't even cast the Sejanis, and we're just kind of booping away.
Second white source.
It is a second white source. I kind of want to hold it, if I'm being honest. I play it because if our opponent plays like a Gargantua or that thing, we're very happy that we get to exile it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's wonderful. That's super good for us. But yeah, ultimately I wind up very glad that I played the Glasswing Grace. But the consideration to hold on to it because we do have a lot of mana already.
Yeah.
So I was trying to set a stop during my upkeep. And then I realize after that, I'm trying to figure out why I didn't get the stop that I set during my upkeep. What I wanted to do was during my upkeep remove the saga counter with the nesting grounds so that I would get to trigger chapter 1 again and exile the fetid Gargantua. What I failed to realize at this moment in gameplay is that the nesting ground says activate only as a sorcery. So even if the stop had worked, I would not have gotten to do the thing. And I still didn't realize all of this here. And so I passed the turn without removing this chapter counter, thinking that I can do it during my opponent's end step. And so now I'm going to go all the way through chapter 3 of Ajani Fells the Godsire without getting to double trigger any of it. And that's on me. That's on me not reading Nesting Grounds and realizing that it's a sorcery speed activation.
It doesn't, because it switches chapters on after you draw a step, which is in the first main phase, right?
Yes, but it puts the trigger on the stack.
Okay.
Which means that in order to respond, you would need an instant speed response.
Gotcha.
So yeah, draw for turn. I look at this nesting ground and go, I want to move this counter off of the Ajanis, and then I'm like, oh, I can't do that. Well, poop. Yeah. Very sad. So I messed this up a little bit. Fortunately, we draw the Rouse, which gets me right out of it.
Rouse to the rescue.
Rouse to the rescue, exactly. So we get to give a thing double strike until end of turn, which we'll do. We then... Yeah, so what we get to do here is play our land, play this Rouse, leaving open the nesting ground. 2 damage to everything. We sweep this up, Marionette Apprentice triggers, that's fine. We then can use one of our energy to give the Nyxborn Unicorn... I guess we don't have to, because it's kind of irrelevant. So the Unicorn has double strike. Attacking with anything other than the Unicorn doesn't really accomplish anything. It does have a Vigilance counter as well. So if opponent blocks with their Gargantua, they get to trade with the Unicorn, which is probably worth doing for them.
Yeah. It gets the 6/6 out of the way, too.
It does clear the 6/6, yes. And if they don't block, they take 6.
Yeah, which is 6 in draft is detrimental.
Yeah, they could also chump with the charge bug if they really wanted to. Yeah, so block with that. Maybe they didn't realize it had double strike. I'm not sure. They kind of snapped off that block. But they also did get the value off of it. They drew the extra cards, all that. So we choose not to re-trigger Chapter 1 of Ral's because opponent right now has a 1-3 that doesn't die to it anyway. So we're going to go to Chapter 2 of the Ral's. And honestly, because we get to trigger this as many times as we want to, yeah, discard this. We just want 2 cards. We just want card advantage at this point. So land for turn, jump this goblin, make sure auto tapper doesn't tap my nesting ground.
Yeah.
Goblin has flying and lifelink.
In the last one, auto tapper was really hitting you hard.
That last video, yeah. Yeah, this time we're paying a little bit more attention to auto tapper. So what we get to do here, we get to attack with the goblin. We can use our energy here, but they can just block with the germ, and we're not really interested in trading off our cat for a germ token. In for 4, we gain 4. Use the nesting ground, remove a saga counter from the Ral and the implicit maze onto, hey, this cat. This cat has a saga counter. This cat is telling stories. But we have a 4-4 with flying and lifelink, racing our opponent, who has, lost their major threats. That Wormcoil Larva is very good. Anyway, we're going to draw a card for turn and then hopefully turn it into 2 cards, because we get to keep triggering Chapter 2 of Ral's as often as we want to. That kite's fine. Not good enough. Let's draw 2. Hey, look. Fanged Flames exiles Wormcoil Larva. Get this thing out of here.
It's got to go.
It's got to be exiled. So I didn't notice that they had a Phyrexian Tower over there. Yeah. So they got to sacrifice their thing. That said, we still have this Galvanic Discharge over here, so if we want to clear like the life-linking side or the death-touching side, we still have options. One of the cool things about Ral and the Implicit Maze, you have until the end of your next turn to cast the cards that it exiles. So I don't even actually have to use this Galvanic Discharge now. I have a whole turn cycle to use it. So right here, we're just going to attack with our Flying Goblin again. Keep pressuring our opponent. The only thing that we really care about is our opponent gaining life. That's kind of it. So we need to remember to put a second chapter counter on our cat.
Still telling stories.
Still telling stories. But we're going to draw 2 basically every turn until this game is over.
That's amazing.
It's a real cute use of that nesting grounds, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Opponent is trying to Spy Master's Vault to put counters on the lifelinker, and we're having none of that. We do not want that lifelinker getting counters, so we use the Galvanic Discharge to clear the lifelinker. Opponent can continue, racing us, for lack of a better term. And we're just going to keep trucking along with our Flying Goblin and drawing 2 cards a turn with the combination of Ral's and stuff. So this is pretty good for our opponent. Victimize to bring back the Wormcoil Larva. Pretty solid. They get to put extra counters on it. If they get to untap and get into combat with this Wormcoil Larva, it has the ability to do a bunch. They cannot activate their Gargantua, notably. Goblin, get out of here. I want 2 cards. Hey, that card's lethal.
That's a bad day right there.
So we're going to check our graveyard. And there's a Saga in there somewhere, so just giving this thing... Yeah, exactly. Which means that we have 6 CMC to exile here. We get to jump our cat, and we have lethal in the air before they get to untap with their worm.
Yeah. So much for their thoughts on that one.
We could have also, notably, just except that our opponent conceded because we had lethal, moved the Saga counter to the bird so it can also tell stories.
They got a lot of stories.
Yeah, many, many stories. All right, so we're in game number 7 here. We are on the draw for game 7, but we've been lucky and been on the play for most of this run. So, we got to be on the draw sometimes.
We do not have our colors.
We do not have our colors. What we do, however, have is like a pretty okay suite of plays.
Right. We only got one that's out of color.
Yeah, so this hand is a little dangerous. If we draw red cards, then we're just going to kind of dirtle and die. But we're not going to get run over, right? We have our Evangel on turn 2. We have double removal spell with Static Prison, and Thraben Charm can clear a small creature if I have my creature in play. We draw another red card, so that's kind of like the scariest possible thing for us. With nothing to do and only 2 lands, I think we just want to, just play this land and go from here. And I remember this game, and this is the worst case scenario for my opponent. They fix my mana. Yeah. So White Orchid Phantom comes into play and destroys a non-basic land, and you can search for a basic. So, like, opponent certainly, blow up the dual land. That makes perfect sense. If I'm the opponent, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
And based on my hand and my deck, the best thing that could have happened to me was them blowing up my dual land to give me a red source.
Because they had no idea.
Yeah, they have no idea. And why would they, right? Like, again, if I'm my opponent there, I'm hitting that land with this Phantom.
Yeah, because you see...
10 times out of 10. Yep.
It's got to go.
10 times out of 10, let's nuke our opponent's mana.
Yep.
So...
But now we have red source.
Now we have our red source. And what we get to do here, they put a counter on this White Orchid Phantom, which is fine. We really don't care about this. What we get to do here is Static Prison to clear the Phantom. Then we get to play the Amped Raptor after giving ourselves the energy from the Static Prison. And now, as we've seen before, the highest cost cards in our deck is 5. So we stack the triggers where we proliferate first, so we go up to 3 energy. Then the Raptor trigger resolves, getting us up to 5 energy. So no matter what the Raptor cascades into, we'll be able to play it. Right? So proliferate here, Raptor go to 5, and immediately hit a 5-drop.
Wow. That's fucked.
So my turn 3...
so messed up.
My turn 3 is an Amped Raptor into a 5-mana Saga because we sequenced our things correctly to make sure that we had the energy. They'll get their White Orchid Phantom back. We don't have the energy to pay for the Static Prison, unless, and this is worth noting, Chapter 2 on Rouse will trigger at the same time as the Static Prison, so we can stack the triggers to where we discard to the Rouse to get access to 2 cards, and if we hit Galvanic Discharge, then we'll be able to get energy so that we can keep the Static Prison around.
Okay.
So we'll see ultimately what we wind up doing. But we stack it so that we have the shot at getting energy at instant speed. So the question is what do we discard? We have a 3-drop, a land, another Rouse. We want to keep the land because we know we have a 5-drop already. We want to keep, I think, the Fanged Flames is just the best removal spell that we have because it's unconditional there. So I think, we discard this Thraben Charm. We don't hit the Galvanic Discharge, so our opponent does get their guy back. That's fine. We play the land from exile. We have the 5th land rolled up, so we know we're going to get to Rouse for a second time next turn.
Mm-hmm.
So best case scenario for us is our opponent just going wide and getting their board swept and the game ends. So what we're trying to set up here is what's our most mana efficient play, and the answer here I think is the Kite and the Inventor. What happens though, and I realize it immediately, I should have played the Inventor first, and the reason being that it causes the proliferate trigger on the Evangel, which then proliferates the Rouse to get me the Weird, and then play the Kite after that, which will trigger the Weird to get an additional +1/+1 counter. So this is just a slight miss on sequencing from me. So what I wind up doing is I'll put a +1/+1 counter with the Inventor onto the Germ token, because it'll get proliferated by the Evangel, which puts it up to a 3/3 flyer. which then theoretically is good against that Phantom sitting over there that our opponent got back, and we make the weird by proliferating the Saga counter. If we had done this, let's air quotes, correctly, then we would have had the Inventor would have come into play and put a +1/+1 counter on the Evangel and proliferated that, so it would be a 5/3 Evangel. Then the Kite would have come into play, which puts a counter on the Weird because of the trigger, just casting a non-creature spell.
Mm-hmm.
And then if our opponent, who is at 5 mana right now, had a Rouse of their own, it would sweep up my Raptor, my Inventor, and my Germ token, but I would get to keep the Evangel and the Weird. Whereas if they have the Rouse here, the only thing I have left is the Germ. And that's why this sequence was incorrect.
Right. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
So, at the end of the day, our opponent needs a lot to go right. And if they had the Rouse, they'd have slammed it already, right? Like, there's no way we think this long if we have the thing that sweeps our whole board.
Mm-hmm.
So, clearly they don't have it. But those are the kinds of things that I should have been considering on my turn when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to play and what sequence I wanted to play them in. So, just like I said, you need to figure out what you do wrong, even when you're winning, so that you can do better later. So they're discharging the Germ so that they can attack with the Phantom, which seems fine. They're not committing more things to the board. What they don't know is that we're going to sweep their board. So they pay their energy to give their guy first strike here so that they get the +1/+1 counter on it. We take some damage, and then we play our land, we play the Rouse, we trigger the Weird, and I think our opponent just concedes immediately because they're down to nothing. Yeah. So, yeah, we got a trophy. We did it. Clean 7-0. Good Burrows deck. On the play more often than not on the play.
That is good.
Good curve, good cards, good removal, a little bit of bad play, a little bit of good play. We did some things right.
Yeah.
We sequenced right to make sure that we could hit our 5-drop off our Raptor.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
One of the main things I like about watching the videos whenever I'm at home watching these
Sure.
is that, like, you go into detail about what needs to be done and what sequences and stuff. So, like, people that don't know how to play Magic or trying to learn how, you're very... It's like a tutorial.
I appreciate that. That's kind of the goal. That's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to accomplish with what I'm saying. So I hope everybody appreciates maybe the over-analysis of some of these lines, some of these plays.
Yeah, because some people, they don't understand what some keywords mean.
Sure.
And then you go into detail while you're explaining what's happening on the board.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jeremiah. That's a pretty big compliment, actually. But anyway, thanks everybody for joining us for the 4th installment of these arena drafts. Hope everybody enjoyed finally seeing a trophy if you've been watching from the beginning.
Yeah.
I want to post all of the drafts that I do, whether I win or lose, because you can learn just as much from the losses as you can from the wins, maybe even more from the losses. So, yeah, I appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. Jeremiah, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you in the next one.